Welcome, welcome. Time to go to Brigham City. It's a cold, chilly night.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? All right then, let's do this.
My first Bigfoot sighting was in 2011 in North Georgia. The boys were in their 20s at the time. Been doing this since I was a kid, but had never done it with a group. So I had seen where the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, was doing an expedition, and we decided to go. Over the years, I found tracks and saw partial sightings, but just really hadn't done anything as a group. So I wanted to try that. So we got up to there on Thursday night, the last weekend in September of 2011. There had been another expedition there the week before, which was kind of unusual. The leader was the same person. His first name was Matt. He had told us what had gone on this trail, and they had some rocks thrown, grunts, sticks, that kind of thing. To be completely honest, I was a little leery about going with a group. There's 25 of us, and we're all sitting around with our headlamps on, our red lights. We're heading out single file. I really felt like it was going to be a snipe hunt or something. But we were up the mountains pretty far. We had gone out on this trail at about 10 o'clock at night. It was a horseshoe-shaped trail that went around this meadow. Since there were about 25 of us, we divided up in groups of 5, and we're going to start out walking this trail. And as we do, they're going to drop 5 of us off at a time in different locations. Well, it just happened that the boys and I, a SWAT member from Charlotte and another gentleman from Chattanooga, had got dumped at the spot where they had all the activity the weekend before. So beautiful night out, not a lot of moonlight, a little bit, pleasant weather, shirt sleeve weather, that kind of thing. So once we got all spread out, the folks the farthest away from camp did their whoops and knocks, nothing. Next group did their whoops and knocks, nothing. Third group did their whoops and knocks. And in between them and us, we heard something go whoop, whoop. And I thought, oh man, that's a big bear out there. And then everybody heard something a little different. Now, when we discussed this later, the boys said they heard birds. I heard something coming through the woods that sounded like a squeaky bicycle wheel, just a kind of thing. So the gentleman that was with us from SWAT, he had all black attire on. And we could hear things coming through, and while we're listening to the woodland noise, he realized his hydro pack had been leaking, so his shirt was soaking wet. So he took off the black shirt, and he had a white t-shirt on underneath. And if you've ever had a Georgia night down there when the moon's up just right, it really lights it up. So you could tell he had this shirt on for a long ways. So as we're sitting there, we could hear bipedal footsteps coming through the brush. There was a lot of mountain laurel up in there and heavy vegetation. Well, Jason, the leader there, he had getting ready to get his whoops and knocks. I was sitting at his feet on the ground leaning against a fallen log, and he put his hands to his mouth, and as he put his hands to the mouth to call, he stopped, reached down, and was rubbing his leg. I said, Jason, what's going on? What's happening? He goes, something hit me in the leg with a rock. I said, oh man, no, it's acorns. I said, I don't know how many of them I've had fall off. He goes, no, this one was a rock. He goes, I tell you it was a rock. I'm like, okay. So he got his night owl mono night vision and started looking around. And as he come back around to, that would be the north, he let out an exclamation. And I said, why? And he was like over behind this tree and about maybe 15 yards, 20 yards out, I could see something moving, but I couldn't tell what it was. I could see the height and everything. To me, it looked about 9 foot tall, light gray, and it was doing the peekaboo thing around a tree. It would look at us one side, and it would kind of go back in behind the tree, and it would come out at a different angle on the other side. So as we're watching that, and I'm looking out I'm looking out towards the south, where the trail is we came in at. As I'm looking out this way, I just looking at stars out there that I could see, and I realized 2 of them were twinkling pretty regular. Well, to me it looked like eye shine. So I asked Jason, I said, when you get a second, swing your night vision over there and see what you see. I see eye shine. He told me he didn't believe in eye shine, but he went ahead and looked, and he went, crap, I think there's 2 juveniles over there. So as we're looking that way, the big one made a big racket against the tree. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was just a big commotion. So we all turned back there to look at the big one. And as we're sitting there looking at the big one, there's a stick that comes in from the south. It's probably 2-3 foot long, inch and a half, 2 inches in diameter. It flew in between Jason and I horizontally. So it didn't fall from the tree or anything. It was definitely throwing us. So we were just kind of freaking out that was really what was going on. And of course, we're on the radios trying to get a thermal imager down there. Everybody's excited. Well, then we could hear the big one walk off. Just walked off. And I'm like, well, and this had been going on for like 30 minutes, which is very unusual for a Sasquatch sighting to last that long. But it was definitely wanting to know what we were doing. So we're kind of waiting for everybody to gather up. The farthest team is starting to come back. I'm leaning against this log, and I hear something walking, heavy. I heard it step on the log, and I heard the log groan with the weight, and then a big thud when it comes down the other side, and then 2 or 3 more footsteps. So at this point, Jason is right at the bottom of my feet. In fact, he stepped on the stick and hit me in the privates, and I thought for sure something had me. But I told him, I said, did you hear that? He said, you tell me what you heard, and I'll tell you if I heard the same thing. So we agreed on what we heard. So it wasn't more than about 10-15 seconds we heard 3 big running steps, and on the trail we came in on, you could see the silhouette of the Sasquatch. I'm going to say it was probably male because as big as it was, it just blocked out the sky from where I was sitting. I would say probably 9 foot tall, 4 foot, 4.5 foot wide at the shoulders. Very huge thing. Wind was out in the wrong direction for a smell. Just blue glowing eyes looked at us for just a second. And it was close enough if he wanted to, he could have reached out and grabbed any of us. And then it just soundly was gone. The shadow, the silhouette was gone. You could see the stars dead and everything was gone. So we are like, oh, this was so cool. And I'm very excited. So went back to camp. We spent the night and we got up next morning, went back out and down where the brush had been smashed down and one thing after the other. So everybody's ever been on an expedition with BFRO, that Thursday is your night you get there, and then Friday, Saturday, you're actually doing a lot during the day, and Sunday, everybody breaks camp and goes home. So we went out and did some scouting up farther up on the mountain that day, and found a nice spot, had a big ravine, small hollow that ran for quite a ways down through there. There was 2 trails split up, so 2 groups. One went on this trail, one went on that trail, with a ravine in the middle. It was so windy, you couldn't hear yourself. I've never been nervous during this Sasquatch thing, but we were spaced out about 50 yards apart. You couldn't hear anything. All you could hear was branches snapping and stuff falling out of the trees. And I laughed because you're sitting there in the dark. I just felt like I'd turn on my flashlight and be like a dozen of them standing there slobbering over me, and I would never know it. So we went back to camp, and one of the things they had suggested we do is take old CDs and then hang them up, make a mobile out of them, because just something different for them to track. I had left mine in the dining fly because I hadn't decided where I wanted to put it yet. So we gave up on the mountain because it was just too windy. We were literally maybe 50 feet from one group to the other at one point. You couldn't hear each other.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Town for huge savings off remaining 2024s. Get 10% off the Taos and Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Cross Sport, and 40% off the ID4 EV. Trade up today and get presidential savings. We'll buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer incentives, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
Some restrictions apply. See dealer for full details.
You might think you're being helpful with your shared prescriptions, that you're sharing a concern, but what you're really sharing are things you never intended. Severe allergic reactions, serious interactions with other drugs or supplements you didn't know your friend or family member was taking, complications for a pregnancy that hasn't even been announced yet, the wrong dosage for the wrong condition. So please share your compassion, just never share your meds. Learn more at knowyourscript.org.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown for huge savings off remaining 2024s. Get 10% off the Taos and Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Cross Sport, and 40% off the ID4 EV. Trade up today and get presidential savings. So buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer incentives, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
My boys went on back ahead of me after we got parked, and they said, you got to get over here and see these. Well, my mobile had been all twisted and braided together and moved at the campsite. My lantern with the salt and pepper shakers I'd left on the table had been moved to the other end. And as we're looking at this, somebody's yelling. One had ran through camp. I suppose a Sasquatch had ran through camp and tripped over the tent and knocked it all down. But we couldn't get it on a thermal. So as we're looking at my mobile, we realize there looks like fingerprints on there. And I don't think I mentioned this, probably 80% of the people there were some sort of police officer. So we all have guns. Nobody's going to run through camp in a costume more than once. Then they come down with that and say, yeah, it's fingerprints. Leave it up overnight. We'll take it down and see what's going on in the morning. All right, so we did that. I woke up about 5:30 in the morning, and I could tell that Sasquatch would know we were sleeping because all you could hear was people laying around farting and snoring in the dark. So it was pretty funny. But I got up about 7 o'clock that morning, and my lantern and everything had been moved back to the position it was when it all started. So then the rest of the weekend, we really never had anything after that. It was a pretty calm weekend. So I was excited. That was the first time I could say that I saw Sasquatch and knew I saw Sasquatch. You know, I've seen things in the past where you're just catching a glimpse of the fur, or you think you saw it, but you're not really sure. Your mind wants to play games with you. But that was definitely a Sasquatch. I've been very fortunate. I've led several of the BFRO expeditions in Florida, and we had one, I want to say the last one we had one in 2013, and at that time, it was probably the weirdest one that we've had. We were in a state park out near Tallahassee in the Panhandle. This would have been about September of 13, I think. The good thing about squatching in Florida is all the trails are pretty much white sand, so they reflect the light really, really good. So you can go out and not have much moonlight and not need your lights or anything. So it's a great time to do this. So first night out, Thursday night, well, I hiked this loop trail to see what we can see. Funny thing is, on the way out there, we could hear this dog just raising Cain across the pasture, probably half a mile away, and just barking. And you know, with the park being there, we would have thought he'd been too barky, you know, used to people coming through and that kind of thing. So we get out there. I've got an old thermal with me, and I'm doing the caboose position. That's the guy at the very end of the group that watches to make sure we don't lose anybody. I had a gentleman with me, and one thing, his name was Richard, but I'm not sure. He was not a big camper, his first time in the woods at night, so he was staying really close to me. So we were hanging back about 50 yards from the main group, and we come out to a fence line, a corner of a fence line, and the trail actually is about 20 yards from the fence line. There's the trail that curves. When you come in on it, you're heading east, and then it curves to the north. So I was walking behind these guys, kind of bored, didn't really feel good. I've had some back surgery, so I don't walk real well. So I got on top of this log, and I just started looking. I did some knocks. I did 3 wood knocks, and nothing. Wait a little bit more, nothing. And then I let the new guy do a wood knock. So as he's doing the wood knock, I'm kind of looking around with my thermal imager. And about 50, 60 yards away, I see a raccoon on top of a log in the thermal. And at least that's what I thought it was. So as I'm looking at it, I see shoulders come up over the log. It was no longer a raccoon. It was a Sasquatch laying behind this log on the ground. I got on the radio and hollered for a teammate Bob, because his thermal records. I said, I told him what was going on, and I said, you know, would you mind coming over here? And he's like, nope, I'll come over and record it. You walk towards where you saw it and see what you find. Thank you, Bob. So the newbie and I, we go over and look. You can still see the heat signature laying on the ground where it had been. And then there was a path where it walked off of this tall grass towards the fence line. Now, between the fence line and this trail is kind of a triangular shaped piece of brush area, 25 yards long, 15, 20 yards deep. So we're on the back side of this fence. I've got the brush between me and the rest of the group, and the newbie is probably about 50 feet behind me where he can see the other teammates. So as I'm talking to I see Bob coming up the trail. At least I can see his red light, I thought. But as I'm talking to Bob, asking him where, you know, if you seen anything, where's everybody at? The new guy is telling me that Bob is not there. Everybody is accounted for over where the new guy is standing. So I'm like, crap, turn around and it's gone. So to this day, I don't know if I was talking to a Sasquatch or what was going on. Because it was in the deep shadows. It wasn't out where the moonlight was hitting it. And like I said, I just thought it was Bob, and he wasn't hearing me. So we kind of gathered all together at a tree about 100 yards from where I had just been standing. And we're talking about it. One guy had a binocular, and he said he could hear it run through the woods. Another gentleman had a thermal and forgot to put his smart card in, so that didn't work, but he'd seen it. So we're all standing there, we're talking, and we decided that we're going, okay, probably not going to have anything else tonight. Let's head back towards camp. And sometimes we've had them parallel us on the trail as we go along. So I said, well, when you get up there where you can see there was a little shallow depression in the ground, you know, not very much, maybe 6 inches, a foot at the most. I said, I'm going to drop down in that, and I'm going to let the expedition walk on. It hadn't been 30 seconds, I could hear one parallel the group as they were walking along. And as they were walking along, I got the creepiest feeling, and the hair in the back of my neck stood up, and walked into the forest on the other side of the trail. I say walked into the forest because at that spot, it's almost a pasture area with just a few trees, so I had to cross an open area. If there was a fence there, I never saw it go over the fence. It just went in like behind a tree, and then I never saw it again. I don't believe in the interdimensional thing, but at that time it made me really think it just disappeared. So it wasn't very much longer after that as we're walking back. We passed a small herd of deer that were out there. It took me about a month before I put two and two together. I think we walked into a deer hunt. I think the one that we saw behind the stump, behind the fallen log, was the killer. And the others that we saw were there for driving. I think that's what we walked into. It made sense. They were, the fence was behind the one that was laying down, so the deer couldn't have got, it would have to get into the fence line, and they're pretty high fences. So I really think that's what we walked into. So we didn't really see anything else after that. The next night we went over to, and I cannot think of the folks' name. They've been on the show several different times, but they don't live too far from where we're at. We usually end up there just to visit and nothing else. And we had one lady that didn't really want to go, and the rest of us went over there. We hadn't been gone 45 minutes before she's calling. Things are throwing sticks at her and pine cones and one thing after the other. So just a lot of activity there. So I was very fortunate. I'd really like to get a daytime look and see what's going on, but I've not been fortunate yet.
You might think you're being helpful if you share prescriptions, that you're sharing your concern, but what you're really sharing are things you never intended. Severe allergic reactions, serious interactions with other drugs or supplements you didn't know your friend or family member was taking, complications for a pregnancy that hasn't even been announced yet, the wrong dosage for the wrong condition. So please share your compassion, just never share your meds. Learn more at knowyourscript.org.
If you love hurricanes, daiquiris, and, well, any rum cocktail, listen up. Captain Morgan's about to shake things up like never before. We're talking Bourbon Street, New Orleans, home to legendary drinks and unforgettable moments. But what if we told you the most iconic cocktails here have one thing in common? Hint, it's not bourbon. That's right, it's rum. And Captain Morgan is bringing unforgettable fun to Bourbon Street in a way you won't want to miss. Get ready for something big as we gear up for Super Bowl 59. Make sure to keep your eyes on NOLA's most iconic street. Who knows, Bourbon Street might just need a new name. Stay tuned for clues and get ready for the most legendary adventure yet. Please drink responsibly. Captain Morgan Original Spice Rum, 35% alcohol by volume. Captain Morgan Rum Company, New York, New York.
So my last expedition I did with the group was in 2015 of October. Same area, different state park, within about 20 miles of each other. So we've been to this place. The rangers call us all the time. Found tracks over here today. They were in the garbage last night. That kind of thing. So we had this. We had a nice group camp. I want to say there was like 30 of us, something like that. Several people camped in a group camp there at the park. A lot of people stayed up around that. About 4 of us spread out closer towards the wood line. Myself and 2 Karens were down that way. The first night we were there, several of us got there like Wednesday night instead of Thursday night. So it's a real foggy night come out. Porta potties are up about 100 yards, about 75 yards from where we're at. And as I'm watching up through there with a thermal, I swore I saw something walk up there, but 2 ladies that had never been in the woods before were real close, and they swore they heard the door slamming on the potty, but we never did find anything. So Thursday night, went out, really didn't get a whole lot. I want to say it rained even maybe a little bit. But then the next day we were out scouting, and sure enough, man, there was these tracks all down this creek. We followed them for miles, and they almost looked human, but they were so sunk in the ground. It had to be one heavy kid. I mean, we're talking just. At the time, I was almost 290, and my feet didn't go in the sand near as much as this little track did. It just looked like a baby squash track. Well, nobody could decide on that, so we put up. There was a permanent campsite about a half mile from the main campsite. So there's been actual thermal images taken at that particular spot. That's supposed to be authentic. I've seen it. I can't really tell for sure. It almost looks animated to me. But anyway, we went down there. spread. I have a habit of when I go out, I take the glow sticks, the little chem sticks that you break, snap, and I cut a hole in one end, and I just do little drops or something as I'm leaving camp going back. My thought is, maybe it'll glow enough with my flashlight guys, I can find my way back. But also I found that squatches seem to be interested in the glow-in-the-dark stuff. So we're down by Primitive Site 1. There's a stump. I put I just did cut one open and spread the glow all over the log. Well, the next day we come back down there and there's this huge track right by it. And it really looked like something had put his hand in it and smeared it. I mean, you couldn't tell that it was a handprint, but you could tell something smeared this other than what it was when we left. So as we're walking back up towards the main camp, it's a long trail. They actually drive some vehicles down there, but it's all sand. And I'm watching these same tracks as I'm going up there. Several of us, or I think there's maybe in that group, probably about 6 of us. And we can see the tracks just plain as day. I mean, you can tell it's Bigfoot. On the curve on the inside of the foot, it was pretty deep. Tracks were maybe, and this is hard packed sand. We're not talking the loose beach sand. The tracks are probably a half inch, 3/4 inches deep in the sand. So there was some weight to it. And then it cut up the same trail that we coming back from camp all the time. So we didn't think anything about it. So Saturday night, we got back in 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and went to bed. Well, I always set my audio recorder. I know what time it was. It was 4:15 in the morning. I heard a huge thump. Felt like, sounded like a tree fell or something along those lines. And then, like just a couple seconds later, something slapped my tent and my head. And I jumped up. The windows were open in the tent. Looked out, couldn't find anything. Got outside, walked around, couldn't find anything. I thought, man, I must have just dreamed that, because, you're all Sasquatched up when you're out there anyway. That's all you can think about. So the next morning I get up, and Karen is about 10 yards from me. I go over there and start telling a story. She gets this big smile on her face and starts laughing. And I say, what's wrong? She goes, you need to talk to the other Karen. She was here and told me the same story about 20 minutes ago. So she got slapped during the night, too. So they're definitely out there. I've seen some things when I've been out doing investigations that I just don't know how to place some of them. And yes, we do go investigate some where you're thinking, what was I thinking that I came out here? But it has been a great experience. Like I said, I'm 65. I've been doing this since off and on since I was about 10 when I saw Saga or Odyssey magazine with Patty on the cover, and was always there ever since. Saw the Minnesota Iceman when I was a kid in the tow trailer for I think a quarter at a mobile home show or something like that, or the mall. I can't remember, but it was something along those lines. And then growing up in Illinois, we had Momo the Monster there in the 70s that was scaring the crap out of everybody. But I've come across some real stories. I've talked to some real true people that are just honest as the day is long, and they truly what they saw was Sasquatch. I hadn't been there very much since the kids were out of college. They were in college and stuff. When they got up, some stuff, and I looked up. I found an Alabama Bigfoot sign website, and there was a sighting that hadn't happened that long ago, and I was thinking it'd probably be at the other end of the state, but it was only like an hour and a half away in Clark County, Alabama. And went over there, the first thing there's a little country store that's out there, and I'm not kidding you, it sounds like a joke, but really all they carry is gas and RC Cola and moon pies. That's about it. And I'd asked the gentleman, is there any public land I can get on? He's like, what are you looking for? I said, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. Oh, we don't have those around here. And so he sent me to the scariest cemetery I'd ever been in, though. So anyway, before I left, he was telling me, stories about Bigfoot that, he said wasn't there, half an hour ago. Clark County, Alabama is about one of the most desolate spots in the South. Very few people live out there. It's mostly woods and riverland. A few years ago, there was a kid out there that was hunting, I believe, and fell in a hole where a tree had been knocked over and was down there for, I want to say, a couple days. They would never say how he got out, but if you talk to the locals, Sasquatch pulled him out. And I've had some good sightings over that way. I've had where the Sasquatch has put his hands on a trailer, where on the double side where the aluminum is oxidized, and just put his hand on it and walk the whole length of that trailer with his hand on there. It was at least twice as big as mine. Back in the 80s, there was a story which I could not track down. The newspaper said they didn't have it, but people told me they had seen it in the newspaper. A dog had brought up a human-like arm with white fur on it, but it was too big to be a human arm, and the sheriff supposed they had it. The sheriff wouldn't tell me that they had it or they wouldn't have it. But the people I talked to down there it had been on their front porch. The lady starts describing stuff to me, and she starts crying because it upset her so much. So I guess in closing, they're out there. If you come across, treat them like a person. That's what I relate to them most as. Nobody's ever been hurt by one, but there's always a chance. People, animals, we all have a bad day. We all have different personalities. So keep out there, keep looking, stay alert, keep squatching.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of them. No other city.
Let me do something my pants. Chicken fingers. They hit the spot. And they fries of golden crispy Texas toast crunchy. And they came fast. Creamy rich. Hello. You hungry? You know you are. We got chicken fingers. Crunchy. Fries of golden crispy, baby. Y'all don't forget about the cane sauce, baby. Woo! They hit the spot. Hello.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? All right then. Let's do this.
Seen a bunch of them. Play.
My Bigfoot sighting, me and my husband's, started in 2017. It was in the spring, late April, I believe. I looked up in a tree as I was feeding my birds out on my back deck, and there was a little structure up in the tree, about 20 feet away. Well, I didn't know what to think of it. I just looked at it and thought, And I didn't know if I really believed in Bigfoot or not either. It's just, I've heard some things about it. I lived in California when I was young, and I heard about the Patty thing, which happened not too far from where I lived. So I didn't know what to think, and I went to my husband and I said, would you come and look at this strange thing in the tree? And I'm wondering if it could be like a Bigfoot or something, because it just didn't seem right to me. He looked at it and he said, oh no, it's just happened naturally there. So I said, okay, I'll just forget about it. And a couple of days I kept looking at it. Didn't fall out, just stayed up there. So I went to my husband again and I said, Dan, are you sure that's just natural? And he kind of got perturbed at me. He grabbed his video camera and he went off into our backwoods in back of our house. And he wanted the video. He told me later that he was just mad at me. He wanted to show me there were no Bigfoot in this area and they weren't coming to our house. They didn't even exist. Well, he was gone for a couple hours, and when he got back, I looked at his face as he came in the door. I said, no, you didn't. And he said, yes, I did. Therefore, we looked at the videos that he had just made, and there were several nice big structures. You could tell that they didn't happen naturally, they were built. And so then we went out in our backyard, see if we could see any other structures out right in the backyard. We live in southern Illinois, and we live in the hills. It's right, our house sits right on the side of a gully, ravine type thing. The back of the house is about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and our deck sits off up about 4 or 5 feet off the ground. So it was all hilly down there, and we just didn't see, humans walking back there. I can't even walk there in the daytime. It's so steep and lots of brush and things down there. So anyways, we're looking down in there, and all of a sudden we come up on this place behind the wild rose bushes. I'll tell you more about this wild rose bush later on, but behind that wild rose bush was well worn down, and you could tell that something had been sitting there. So we got kind of scared about that, and we found a few other little signs that they were there. There's a path going up to the rose bush hiding place. We just kept looking around, and we just kept thinking, oh boy, they're coming to our home. What are we going to do? And then we started looking back over, his mom and dad owned this property. They bought it like over 60 years ago, built their house on it, raised the kids on it, Dan, my husband included. And there were some strange things that happened to them over the years. So we kind of figured they were probably here a long time. And they hadn't bothered anyone, hadn't hurt anything. No one even knew they were here. So we kind of lost our fear and decided, well, what are we going to do with this, And finally our curiosity about these creatures got the best of us, and we decided we were not going to try to make them go away. We weren't going to put cameras up. We weren't going to shine bright lights or, fire guns at them or anything. All we did was put a microphone up in our window off our back where the gully was. So we put the microphone up, and sure enough, that night we went to bed and laid there listening. We had the microphone through a transmitter, and we could listen to whatever happened out there over our little FM radios with headphones. We could hear real good. And that night they came. And, they sneak up, they come up, we hear one walk. Well, first off, what would happen is we hear owls hooting, and then the dogs would start barking, all the neighbor dogs. And then as they got clearer, we could hear them whistling, doing some whistling. And then we'd start hearing the footsteps, the heavy foot treads coming up. They'd come up one at a time. One would come up, and he'd either stand or sit there for a few minutes, and then we would hear the other one. He'd come up whistling, and they'd whistle back and forth, and then another one would come up, and they'd just sit out there. They were watching us, I guess. So we went through that a few nights, and Dan, he's such a perfectionist, he decided he hadn't gotten a good enough video of the structures out in the woods. So he takes the camera out there, not twice, but 3 times he was out there, looking at those structures, explaining what the structures were to the camera, and we think they saw him looking at their structures. Because the next day he went out there, he found all the structures that he found destroyed, broken down. So we didn't know what to think about that, Why would they destroy their own structures? And finally I began to think that maybe because Dan was looking at them, they were upset, and they might have figured that if we tear the structures down, he won't come out in the woods anymore. We don't really know why they did that, but that's what I'm kind of leaning towards. So anyway, that night they came, but they came in a different way. This night they were real loud. They didn't sneak up. They were stomping on the boardwalk we have across the back of our house, so we can walk on that hill. We can walk out in the back of the house there. They were stomping, they were breaking big sticks, whistling, and kind of talking. We couldn't really, it was low and guttural, so we really couldn't hear too much of what the words were, but I think they were speaking in their own dialect. Well, that went on for about an hour or two, and we just laid there. We were in bed, and we just didn't get up. We didn't make a sound. We just laid there listening to what was going on. And I think really they might have been testing us out to see what we would do. Would we be aggressive towards them if we knew they were coming? They did not know we had the microphone, so they were making noises loud enough that we could hear them from just our normal ears. Well, that went past, and we thought, well, they might not come anymore. But sure enough, they wouldn't come every night, but maybe every 2 nights, and then they wouldn't come for like 5 or 6 days. Sometimes a week would go by, we wouldn't hear them.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown for huge savings off remaining 2024.
Holy
Get 10% off the
shit,
Taos
man.
Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Cross Sport, and 40% off the ID4
Nowhere.
Trade up today and get presidential savings. We'll buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer incentives, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown for huge savings off remaining 2024s. Get 10% off the Taos Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Cross Sport, and 40% off the ID4 EV. Trade up today and get presidential savings. We'll buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer incentives, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
Kept listening. They were doing all kinds of things. We heard them breathing. We heard them eating something, breaking sticks, whistling, belching. We heard them doing all kinds of things. So we got used to that, and they just seemed to make themselves at home here. And as time went by, I thought, well, we need to do something else, because they would do that for years. So one night, I got up out of bed, and I went to the door, and it was open just a little crack for air. That's one thing I'll explain to you later about how we felt about open windows and doors. Anyway, I went there and I said, "Hello." "I know you're there," I told them. "We are your friends, and you're welcome to come here as long as you respect us and all of our things. You're welcome here." I told them that we knew they were coming for a long time and that they didn't need to change that, but they just needed to respect us. And I said, "Thank you," and I went back to bed. Now, I know that sounds crazy to you people listening, but this is the way I reacted, and I'll just continue on with that. But anyway, so this went on for a while. They kept coming back, and I kept going out on the deck, and well, finally I went out on the deck when I got brave enough and talked to them. I just figured fear is what's going to be the worst in this relationship, because if we fear them and we do things to make them fear, we're not going to learn anything from them. You know, I wanted to try to develop a relationship with them. And so that's what we slowly did. I kept talking to them. They kept coming. It went on like that for a few weeks. And then one night I was laying in bed, half asleep. I had the earphones on. But all of a sudden, my headboard is there's a closet behind my headboard, and there's about 5 feet in between the outside wall and my headboard. And I heard a tap, and I thought, what is that, you know? And then I realized one of them was right outside, and they tapped on the wall. So I thought, what can I do? So I went on my headboard, I went, tap, tap, I know you're there, I was saying. And this continued on. Every time he would come up to the house, I'm assuming it's this one that I'll tell you about in a minute, he would tap one time and I'd tap 2 times. And I think he was doing that to tell me, I'm up here, don't come to the door, don't get out of bed and come to the door, I'm up to the house, I will be uncomfortable with you coming to the door at this time. What he wanted to do is, my bedroom wall is facing our garage and chicken house wall. And he wanted to go up in there, it was gated off at the front, he wanted to go up in there and look at the things that Dan piled up in there. Dan would put lawnmowers, tanks, you know, whatever things from his job, and he would just put them up in there until he could store them away or whatever. So he would go up there and I would hear him in between the house and the garage fooling with that stuff. He'd pick something up, put it down, or fiddle with something, and he just loved doing that. Well, that went on for a few weeks. So then all of a sudden, we find out that he's going out into the front yard. See, we live kind of out in the country. There's no street lights out here. There's only people's porch lights. So we don't keep our porch light on. Dan he likes to go out there at night and sit. He doesn't like the porch lights, so he just leaves them. We don't turn them on. We don't leave them on. And this young Bigfoot was going out there. He liked our cars. He started leaving handprints, fingerprints, and one time he even left us a picture he drew, a little doodle art thing, on our car window. Well, his personality was starting to come out. Dan, this is what's sickening to me. Dan made some recordings, okay, off of the microphone. And he put them somewhere in some file so he could go back and listen to them later on. Because we had so much going on with what they were doing that he didn't record it. Well, anyway, he dug around and he did find this one recording, and what it is a sound. What you hear on it is you hear a big crack, and then you hear a whoo, and then you hear this big, deep voice say, Tomas. When we heard that, we flipped out, and I said, Dan, you know what that sounds like? Dan says, yeah, I know exactly what it sounds like. The young Bigfoot that's going out to the car made a noise, cracked that plastic sound, and the big one, which we think is the Papa, he was scolding him, saying, you're making too much noise. Well, that's the way we interpret it. But anyway, that is what we think happened. And when the Bigfoot, the Papa, we think, said Tomas, that's where I got the name for the young Bigfoot. The one that likes the cars, the one that doodle arts and goes out front and fools around out front. He's left little structures out in front. We have a fish pond out there, and we had at that time we had a tank of fish. Dan was doing some hydro gardening, using fish, and the water was circulating into a vat where he had plants growing into this media. Well, anyway, we had fish in one of these tanks, and we had a net there. One morning we went out there, and the net was gone. The side of the tank was all wet, and when we looked in, the fish, half of the fish were gone. the goldfish. They were goldfish. So we found the net down into the woods a little ways. So apparently, we think the young guy went on a little fishing expedition and got a few little snacks of the goldfish. His personality was just kind of coming out to us with the car thing, everything. So we put up a gifting shelf and we decided we were going to put some toys out there for them to look at and play around with or whatever. We went to Walmart and we found this little red car, the same as our car. We have a red car. So we bought that little thing, and the wheels are ones that you can wind it up and then the wheels, go and you can run it along the ground or whatever. It was out there a couple of days on that shelf, and one night I heard those wheels whirring over and over again. I heard those wheels turning, and I started laughing because I thought, oh my Lord, he's found the little car and he knows what to do with it. So he plays with that car like that. And so his personality is getting stronger and stronger. The only thing he ever took off of that gifting shelf was I put a red rock out there, and we put a little plastic star that glowed in the dark. He took those, or one of them took those. I don't know exactly which one, but I think Tomas took it. He likes the color red. And the little star glowed in the dark. And we never found him. We looked all over this place. Never could find him on the ground or anything. So that's the only things except for fruit, that they have taken from us. Everything stays here. The toys, always, they'll play with them and move them around. They're always on the gift shelf in the morning. Funny story I have to tell you about the little red cars. Well, every morning, Dan, before he went to work, sometimes it was, when the sun first came up, he'd go out and look to see if anything was moved or taken off of the gift shelf. It's fastened to the deck out in back, the gift shelf. So one morning he was out there, and things had been moved around, and the little red car had its back kind of shoved up into the corner of the gift shelf. And Dan picked it up, and those wheels started turning and whirring. Dad said he dropped the little car. He was so startled. And when I heard about it, I said, yeah, I bet that young guy was down in the bushes in the gully there watching you as you picked up that car. He probably thought that was pretty funny.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown for huge savings off remaining 2024s. Get 10% off the Taos and Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Crossport, and 40% off the ID4 EV. Trade up today and get presidential savings. We'll buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer sales, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
Looking to buy your dream home or rent that perfect apartment? With the Redfin app, you'll know the moment your next place hits the market. Set up your gotta have it wish list, and Redfin will send you real-time notifications for properties that match. And when you're ready to see it in person, scheduling a tour is just a tap away. Thinking about selling? Redfin can do that too. In fact, Redfin agents close twice as many deals as other agents, so they know how to get the best price for your home. And with a listing fee as low as 1%, Redfin charges half of what others often charge. So you could save big, like really big. Last year, Redfin saved home sellers $118 million. So whether you're buying, renting, or selling, Redfin's ready to help you win. Download the Redfin app and start searching today.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown for huge savings off remaining 2024s. Get 10% off the Taos and Golf GTI, 15% off the Tiguan, 20% off the Atlas Crossport, and 40% off the ID4 EV. Trade and get presidential savings. We'll buy your car for its original base MSRP when you upgrade to a new car at Volkswagen Southtown. That's right, the original base MSRP, only deducting for mileage, manufacturer sales, and any damage.
Don't miss out. Shop this incredible sale at VWSouthtown.com.
Restrictions apply. See dealer for full details.
So continuing on with the story, so many things happened. I think one of the most interesting things that happened is I started making bricks around the house. He left them on the bed. And he started playing the stick game again. And he'd go down, take sticks and maybe write his name or something, or, make figures with it. And the next day he'd go out, it would all be reconfigured. And sometimes there would be these glyphs. Well, one day I went out there to feed the birds, and on the steps was this glyph. It was an A glyph. I think maybe some of you have seen those glyphs on some of the people's things they put on YouTube and stuff. But anyways, we got it all recorded. And he did other glyphs. He did one in front of my door. It was an X with a stick underneath the X. And what that means, I do not know. But they were doing the glyphs. He was doing the glyphs. And we believe that he is the main one. He is the one that interacts. He has the family. They come. We know that he brings the baby. I'll get into that later. That they all come, but he is the one that's doing the stuff. Maybe. He really does want to communicate and contact with us, as I've described the little games. Dan loved the one where he would, every morning he'd walk out in the backyard and down to the gully, and all the maple branches, the tips of them would be tied in together, interlaced. And so Dan would go walking through there, and those things would spring apart. It wouldn't be the wind, because a lot of times here in the summer the wind doesn't blow. And this would be every time Dan would go down in there, he'd find these branches tied together like that. And Dan would untie them all, and then the next morning he'd go down there, they'd all be tied up again. So it's really interesting some of the things they do. They do some really, how do I say, not in your face things, not blatant things, They do things, it's like they try to get you to notice. And Dan's really good at noticing the small things. We call it the small things. And Dan is really good at noticing that stuff. So anyways, this went on for a while, and I'm trying to think what next. I think that the next thing that happened was that Dan, we had chickens, and the chicken house is not too far from the back deck on the side of the garage. This was in early 2017 that this happened. Then we had about, 25, 30 chickens. I can't remember exactly how many. And every night he would count them before he would lock the door. And he had 2 latches that only a human hand could operate. So we'll get that clear right now. He counted them, he put them in. It was cold January. He didn't want to leave any outside to freeze to death, or, the predators get them. And the next morning when he went out there, he opened the latches, opened the door, and he noticed that 3 of the chickens were gone. Well, we talked about that. What neighbor would steal our chickens? See, this is before we knew about the Bigfoot. That happened the next spring. So we were accusing the neighbors and wondering what neighbor it was, and blah, blah, blah. Well, finally, that kind of went by, and then it was in the spring that I noticed the first structure in our tree in the backyard. So another thing that happened before we knew they were here is in the fall of 2016. It was nice weather. I had the door cracked in the window, my bathroom window open. It was about 11 o'clock. I was trying to get ready to go to bed. I was washing my face standing there. And all of a sudden I heard this whistle, like someone trying to get your attention. Well, I just stood there. I was frozen. And then I heard, hello, a young man's voice saying, hello, real friendly. And I started getting really mad. And I thought, oh my gosh, some neighbor is doing the creeper thing and Tom peeping in my window. I was really mad. But I'm kind of cool pinch there. I kind of keep my head. I decided I was not going to let him know that he scared me. So I just ignored it. I just thought, I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to give him the pleasure of knowing he scared me. So I just turned the light off, closed and locked the door, and got in bed. And I lay there, watching for the flashlight, listening for the steps, but the window was still open. I heard and saw nothing. I lay there for a long time, not a peep. And I thought, wow, how did he do that? How did he get away without me hearing or seeing a flashlight? Well, he could have had night vision, I guess. But on the side of the hill, in the brush, and no, I don't think so. I would have heard something and seen a flashlight if he didn't have night vision. Well, so that went by. That was in October of 2016. Then the chicken thing happened, and then that April, after the January the chicken thing happened, then that April is when the structure happened, and Dan went out into the woods to see if there was anything out there, and you heard the story how he did find the structures. Well, I just needed to go back a little bit there to explain to you that other things had happened before we even knew it. His family even had some things, I think, going on there, but I'm not going to speak about what happened to them. I don't have any permission to speak about it. Well, anyway, so as time goes on, I'm talking to them on the deck. Things are just not progressing very much, you know. One suggestion, by this time I was getting on, looking at the Bigfoot groups and trying to see, you know, what I could do, what advice people would give me and stuff, you know. One person said, well, it might be they speak a native language. So I thought, well, Cherokee is probably a language pretty widespread. So I thought, I'm going to try to speak Cherokee to them. So I got on YouTube and I found a man who was giving Cherokee lessons, and I learned some readings and some things to say to them. So one night I went out there and I was speaking to them this reading. I greeted them in Cherokee. I can't even remember what it was anymore. I can't remember it. But they responded by, I think it was mouth pops. One part of the yard I heard a mouth pop, and then on the other side of the yard I heard, and then somewhere else I heard like a mouth pop. It was like a clap, only it sounds hollow. It doesn't sound like a clap. It does sound like a clap, but more hollow. I can't explain it. So I thought, well, what does that mean? Did they like it that I spoke Cherokee? Was it approval, or was it, you know? I'm sure they were laughing at my Cherokee if they did speak Cherokee. So I continued to do that, but I never hear anything from that at all. I also started begging him to say hello, like he did that October night. I kept begging him, say hello like you did before, and I never heard anything. And then after a while, one night I was asking him to say hello, and I just heard this beautiful flute sound, just one note of this, one long note, like a flute. And that's all I could get out of him. Just no hello, no hello. So I thought, well, okay, he's not going to talk to me. Well, one night I asked him again, please talk to me and tell me hello. Nothing. I turned around to go back to the house, and just as I was opening the door, I heard this man's voice say, "Wah, wah." What does that mean? And I thought, well, what does that mean? Say hello. But that's the only two words that I have heard them personally speak. Now I'll tell you how Dan had his first sighting of this young guy, we think. One night we'd gone to bed, and Dan heard this weird clunking noise and voices talking. And we have a spare bedroom that I grow orchids in. And we keep the shades up so that the light comes in, and I don't have to keep opening and shutting the shades. So Dan got up real quiet out of bed. He didn't turn the lights on. He sneaked into that spare bedroom, and he looked out the window. And in our yard, we have some bushes towards the neighbor's house, and it was late fall, so all the leaves were off the trees and the bushes. And what he saw was this figure crouching behind our hydrangea bush and peeking around the bush, looking at these men working on the car.
Shop our President's Day sale at Volkswagen Southtown.
Holy moly.
And Dad was so confused because why would he thought it was our neighbor at first, because our neighbor is a big guy. He's 6'5", he weighs about 300 or 400 pounds, and that's what Dan saw behind the bush. The porch light was on at the neighbor's house, so Dan saw more of a silhouette of this, because we didn't have our light on. But he saw the silhouette of this big, large figure crouching behind our bushes, peeking out, and he kind of paced back and forth, crouching, pacing back and forth a little bit behind the bush, and then he'd peek out again. And Dan said he was so confused he didn't know what to think. Well, the men got through working on the car, I guess, so they shut the hood of the car and started walking back to the house. Well, this figure behind the bush just rapidly walked back down into the woods. And Dan said that's the first inkling he had of who that was. It was not the neighbor. It was not a human, because they walked down into those steep woods without a light, without anything, just very rapidly walked down the woods as the men went into the house. So that is Dan's sight. He said he was big, large, barrel-chested, big head. You couldn't see the facial features, but he said he was just a big guy, at least as big as my neighbors. My husband is 6'4", so he's a big guy too. But he said he was big, and he said he just walked down into those woods with long strides and never even hesitated going down into the gully. So that's his story. Now, I'll tell you about my sighting. Mine was after Dan saw his Bigfoot. We think it was Tomas, what we call Tomas. I got really jealous. I wanted to see him too, you know. So I kept begging him when I go out there, please let me see you. Please let me see you. Just one time, just let me see you. Well, this went on for months. Got into winter time. And around my birthday, which is February 10th, I was asking him still. I forgot to get the bird feeders off the deck. It was like 9-ish and 10-ish, and I knew that the raccoons might drag the things down and break them again like they had with that one. So I usually bring him in off the deck. Here it was, freezing cold. Oh man, it was cold. And I went out there in my flannel nightgown and I started getting the feeders down. And I don't know what made me look. I looked down into this gap between the trees, the only place I think I could have seen him that far away, get through the woods. And I saw something there, and I looked, and I could see his eyes. And I focused in, and he was laying down on his stomach there, like he was doing a woman's push-up, sort of. He was supporting his upper body with his arms, doing a woman's push-up. And just looking at me, and he would blink, occasionally blink, but he didn't move. He didn't move a muscle, just stared at me. And I kept looking, I thought, and then it dawned on me, well, that's him. I said, Tomas, hi, you let me see you, thank you. Well, I was just gushing like stupid woman, and I just kept talking to him and thanking him and looking at him, trying to gather what I could of his looks. And because he was laying down, I couldn't really see his height. But he was big. What impressed me most were his arms and shoulders. He was not bulky, but he was kind of built like a well-conditioned athlete. I could see his muscles. He was in nice condition, big.
There
His hair was about, I think on his head it was like 6 inches long, and on his body it was shorter, but it was hard to tell. He was laying down, but I know his body hair was shorter. And his eyes were big, and he did have a mustache and a beard. I could see his mouth sort of underneath the mustache. But what's funny is his mouth didn't look like that long, slashy thing that you see in a lot of the pictures you picked up. It looked more like a human mouth, more voluptuous, or whatever you want to call it. And his mustache, here's what got me, is his mustache looked like it had been trimmed. It wasn't hanging over his mouth. It looked like it had been trimmed. And he had a nice beard. His eyes were big. You could see the brow ridge. But his hair, it looked like he had more of a forehead than you see. The hairline did not go all the way down to his brow ridge. But he had a forehead. So what was really weird was his hair. It looked like he'd taken his hands and rubbed his hands up through his wet hair, and it was spiky up on top of his head. And I almost laughed because I was thinking, he looks like a punk rocker, for goodness sake. That is so funny. I just kept looking at that hair like that. But he just laid there and blinked. And all of a sudden, I was getting so cold. I said, oh my gosh, I have to go in. I'm going to get frozen here in that flannel nightgown. And it was, I think it was like below freezing that night. But I didn't want to go in. But I just started shivering and shaking, and my voice was shaking, and my heart was beating fast. And so finally, I just thought, I have got to go in. So I told him good night and thank you, and I have to go in because I'm really cold. And I walked towards the house, and then I thought, no, I can't wait. I went back, and he was still laying there. And I stood there another few seconds, and then I said, oh, I've got to go in. So I walked back inside, and I got warm. And a few minutes later, I went back outside to see, but he was gone, of course. But when I think about that experience, I think, wow, I think he let me see him. He let me see him, and he let me see him in such a non-threatening way that I wouldn't be scared. Because I think these creatures really are, they really do understand that humans, to see what they are and see what they look like in their largeness, that humans are afraid of them, of their seeing. So I think that's really why he let me see him like that. He didn't want me to be afraid. The only time I was ever afraid of him, or any of them, is a few weeks into this, I got a smart idea, and it wasn't such a smart idea. I decided At this time, I thought they were just intelligent animals. This is before I really got to know them. So I thought, well, I'm going to see if they will miss my interaction with them. I just did not go out on the porch and talk to them, on the deck and talk to them. I didn't tap when he came up to the house. I just totally ignored him for a few days. I wanted to see, would they miss me? What would happen? Well, I found out what would happen. One night I gone to bed, and it was early morning, just before dawn. I heard a sound like no one wants to hear, and no one wants to be woken up with this sound. It was a roaring, I call it a roar, because it was more of a roaring, growling sound that just went through my body. I mean, I could feel it, the sound waves going through my body. I sat up straight in bed, and I didn't want to open my eyes because we had a big glass sliding door, and the door was even open a crack. And I was so afraid that if I opened my eyes, I would see him standing there at the door. And I just could not for the life of me face that. If I saw him standing there, I would have just had a heart attack. So I just sat there, and I just kept saying, I wanted to get up and run, but I just kept telling myself, don't scream, don't run, he'll go away, just sit there and be quiet, he'll go away. That's what I kept telling myself. And so I know it only lasted a few seconds, but it seemed like forever. And the sound just going through my body, it was just and it stopped. I'm sure it was only a few seconds that he made that noise. I sat there with my eyes still closed. I was still afraid I'd see him if I opened my eyes. And then all of a sudden, I heard him, his big footsteps walking away. I didn't have the earphones on at this time. This is something I heard because he was so close to the house. And as he walked away, I opened my eyes, and I could still hear his footsteps going off. The leaves were crunching. And I opened my eyes, and I could still hear his footsteps going off. And I thought, it is not a nightmare. This is real. He was really here, and he roared at me, and I knew why. I knew why. I thought, I hurt his feelings, because that's what that sound sounded like. It was just kind of a hurt feeling. It was loud, but it wasn't an angry roar like a lion's roar. It was different. And I felt so bad, and I thought, man, I've done it now. He'll probably never come back again. That night, I got up. Couldn't even sleep. I got up and had coffee and thought about it. And so I thought, I got to tell him I'm sorry to fix this, try to fix it. That night, I went out on the deck, and I just poured my heart out and said, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry that I hurt your feelings. I didn't realize I would hurt your feelings. And I told him I would really try to never do it again. So please forgive me. And I couldn't hear anything, nothing. So I went ahead and went to bed, went to sleep. The next morning I went out to feed the birds, and I found this wonderful gift that he laid there on the deck for me. It was the outline of a Bigfoot, a big twig, a big long twig. And I don't know if he twisted it that way or if he found it. I don't know. I have a feeling that he made it, because it was in the perfect shape of the head of the Bigfoot and the shoulders. And I knew exactly when I saw it what it was. It was from him. So that night I thanked him, and told him thank you, and let's just be friends now. I'll never do anything like that again. And that's what's happened. We just developed this friendship. He comes up to the house.